Hi, this is Barry. Welcome back to my wood turning channel. In a previous video, I showed you how I made a bunch of these blanks for spindle turning practice. In this video, we'll get started practicing by turning this square blank into a round cylinder. So when I was thinking about putting together this video, it occurred to me that one of the skills that you need is to be able to make a bevel supported cut. But it's hard to see that when you're turning square stock because as this piece turns around, you're only hitting the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn a piece and let you watch me. I'm going to turn it down to a cylinder, and then I'm going to use that cylinder to demonstrate the bevel support, because I think it's a lot easier to see the bevel support on a cylinder because you're not cutting air. And then after you've got a chance to understand the bevel support, then we'll come back and we'll turn another one of these blanks down to a cylinder, and you can hopefully tie it together and it'll make more sense. So let's get started. I'll mount this in the lathe and I'll turn it down to a cylinder. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark the center, and I'm just going to use anything I've got laying around as a straight edge. I'll just use an extra piece of wood here that I've got, and I'm just going to mark corner to corner. There are more than one way of doing this, but just for the demonstration I'll show you this. Now this doesn't have to be exact, you just need to get it close for what we're doing here. In other cases it may matter more, but in this instance it doesn't really matter too much. Just the closer to the center, the larger your cylinder will be, because you're moving less waste. Alright, so I've got an X marks a spot on both ends. So if you want, you can just mount this in the lathe and just you visually look for the centers, but if you want to make it a little bit more a little bit easier to line up, you can use a center punch. This one's an automatic one. You don't have to have one. It doesn't have to be spring-loaded like this one, but alright, now you've got a small little indentation where you're going to mount. I'm just going to use the drive center that came with the lathe. It's just a standard 4-prong drive center. And also it's a good idea to clean the inside of the taper before you insert the drive center. Alright, when you mount the piece in the lathe, just line up that center here. And then get your tailstock close, and then go ahead and line that up. And then you'll want to tighten your tailstock down. And this is a soft wood, so it's going to compress the fibers. There's not going to be much of a gap. And on this end, you'll want those drives for the drive center to just barely engage. And if you turn it slightly, it may loosen up. And it should be snug. This is your standard, what is this? Says it's 7/8 spindle roughing gouge. Now this is a tool that you will use for spindle work only. Don't ever use this with a bolt. Now when I set the tool rest height, you want the height to be so that the cutting edge, which is going to be the top edge of your tool, is roughly equal to center. So this is a little bit high. I'm going to bring it down. And the other thing is, when you're looking down, when you eyeball it, you can look and see the bedways, and you can visually see that this is parallel to the bedways, because usually the bed is light colored silver and there's a shadow there, and you can line up, and that'll help you make sure that it's straight going across. Okay, and every single time before you turn your lathe on, turn the piece. If you've got a handle on the headstock, or if you need to turn it manually, turn the piece and make sure that it's not interfering with anything before you turn it on. And then the speed is the medium speed, which I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's probably around 1,000 to 1,500 RPM. And then stand aside when you turn it on. You should wear your face shield for this, and probably breathing protection. I'm not going to for this video because I'm going to be talking to you. Okay, so now this is just a demonstration. I'm going to point out a few things. I'm going to cut downhill, which I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to start at the ends and work my way back, and I'm going to do what's called the ABC, anchor, bevel, cut. So I'm going to do anchor on the tool rest, and then bevel. Now, there's not cutting going on here. I'm going to pull the handle up, which still the end of it down, and then you'll see those pieces start flying. As soon as those start flying, like this. I could be more aggressive, but I'm not. Now I'll stop and show you. Alright, you should be able to see here that we've taken off these corners all the way around. And I've started here, and next pass I'll start here and go a little deeper, and I'm making these angles. So I'm going to repeat that a few more times. Ankle, bevel, cut. So you can see it here, I haven't cut any. There's in the middle, and this is down to a cylinder. So this is my stopping point. I'm going to keep going until I get this all the way across. Anchor, bevel, cut. And then I'm just going to, now on this end, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go back to the other edge. See, there's just a little bit left in the middle. Go ahead and take this off. Alright, I have turned down the square, and now I've got a cylinder. Alright, now that I've got this into a cylinder, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about a bevel supported cut. Now this tool is flat across the front, but this back side is what we're calling the bevel. This is a 60-degree angle. So it's 60-degree angle relative to the cutting edge. So I mentioned to you earlier, there's the anchor, bevel, cut, ABCs. Anchor means you've got it securely on the tool rest, and that's the first thing you're going to do. Now this is a bevel supported cut, so the second step is to touch the bevel. So as the piece is turning around, you're going to engage that. But you can see that the bevel is touching on the back, and you can feel it rubbing, but there's no cutting because that cutting edge hasn't engaged. So the way you engage the cutting edge is you bring the tool forward slightly until you start seeing fibers coming over that front edge. Now that tool is engaged because the cutting edge is in contact with the workpiece. So to repeat that, anchor, bevel, and then bring the handle up, which brings the tool down until it starts engaging, and you see those little fibers coming up. ABC, anchor, bevel, cut. For bevel supported cut, this is the same formula you will use regardless of the tool. Now, there are more than one ways to engage the bevel, and you can look at this angle that goes across. If I go straight here and I go anchor, bevel, and cut, you can see that those fibers are coming out straight across. Now the wood grain goes this way, so I'm cutting straight across the side grain. And you'll see that it's pretty rough cut. It'll do the job, and for roughing out a cylinder, it's probably okay, but it can sometimes chip. And here's an overhead view of the same thing. I'm presenting the tool straight against the wood, and it's going straight into the side grain, and it's tearing out the fibers. And as it comes around, you can see that there's a lot of tear out, so it's very rough. If I turn the tool this way and engage it, I'm still cutting straight against the side grain here. And because the shape of the tool, that edge isn't engaged, but it's still the same thing. So it doesn't really matter as long as this angle is perpendicular to the piece. And here's another overhead shot where I'm rotating the flute forward or back, but I'm still presenting the tool at a perpendicular angle to the axis of rotation. And because this tool has a flat cutting edge, I'm still cutting straight into the side grain and still producing a rough cut even when I rotate the flute forward or backwards, or left or right. Okay, so now I'm going to add one more variable. I'm going to go ahead and rotate the flute. I'm cutting from the headstock to the tailstock. I'm going to rotate the flute facing about 45 degrees toward the tailstock. And I'm also going to pull the handle back toward myself so that I'm leading with the cutting edge of the blade. And as I do the anchor bevel cut and that cut engages, now the edge, right where those fibers are coming off, is coming off at a 45-degree angle. And that's going to be a lot smoother, a lot more efficient cut, and you'll notice there's a lot less tear out. And as you progress along the cut, you're making basically a long spiral, a very smooth cut at 45-degree angle. And here's an overhead view. I'm rotating the flute towards the tailstock, which is the direction of the cut, and then pulling the handle back until that edge engages. And it's still anchor bevel cut, and you can see that at the point where the fibers are exiting, it's engaging at a 45-degree angle. And if I do this enough times around, you should be able to see that it's much cleaner than the area right next to it where it was presented straight against the grain. And here's a close-up showing the cut. This is straight into the side grain. It's very rough. But instead I rotate the flute and then pull the handle back, so I'm leading with the cutting edge. And now it's cutting at a 45-degree angle. And you'll see as it comes around, it's much smoother. It's a very smooth cut and much more efficient. So this is the cut we want to make when we're truing the blank, taking it from square to a cylinder. Even though we're just hitting the corners, this is the same technique that we'll be using to true up that blank. And we'll keep making a spiral, advancing in the direction of the cut, which is from right to left in this view. And the bevel is gently touching the wood just behind the cut. I'm going to go ahead and spin this back up, and I'm going to do a bevel supported cut from here toward the end. Anchor, bevel, there's my cut. Do it again. Don't hit the tail rest. And you can see that for the most part this is pretty clean. Not perfect, but it's a pretty clean cut. Now I want to point out that I've been cutting from a larger diameter to a smaller diameter, and that's called cutting downhill when you're in spindle mode. And if you think about this piece of wood, it used to be part of a tree and it was growing straight up and down in this orientation, so the fibers are going lengthwise along the workpiece. And when you cut from a larger diameter to a smaller diameter, you're just shearing off the ends of those fibers, whereas if you go from a smaller diameter to a larger diameter, in other words uphill, you're pulling up underneath those fibers and tearing them out, and that's why you get a rough surface. Here I'm going to cut a cove where I'm going from a larger to a smaller diameter and then coming back out, going smaller to larger. And you can see where I was going downhill, larger to smaller diameter, it's very smooth. And when I was coming from the smaller diameter to the larger diameter, it's very rough. There's lots of tear out where the tool was reaching underneath and pulling out those fibers. Now I can reverse this. It's not just the wood. I can turn the tool around and do the same cut where I'm going downhill left to right and then going uphill on the other side of the cove. And I'll just do another pass to show it a little bit better. And again, the downhill portion is now on the left, but it's nice and smooth, and the uphill portion has lots of tear out. And another reason to avoid cutting uphill is that you can get a really bad catch, which can either damage your piece or can send the piece flying. Okay, so I showed you how I turned a square stock down into a cylinder, and I used this to demonstrate the bevel supported cuts and the need to go downhill and why that matters. So I'm going to take a new blank and I'm going to mount it in the lathe, and I'm going to show you again. And this time I'm going to focus on the bevel support even though we're just hitting those corners until we get it down to a cylinder. So let's take a look. I'm going to demonstrate it just the beginning cut. I'm going to start close to the edge and work toward the edge. Anchor, bevel, cut. Alright, that's the technique. That's the only technique we're going to use. You can see I'm taking these corners off, working down from square to cylinder, and this is in between, and this is fairly smooth. If I'm not going out larger diameter to smaller diameter, then these pieces can chip off. I can get stuff like that. And I don't want that. So let's do this anchor. Little knot there. Anchor. So I'm just going to keep starting further back and working my way to this. This is my point where I've got it round, so I can stop there. So I'm just going to keep going. Now we do this other end. Start. Just going to work this way. Turn the flute toward the cut. Pull the handle back. Although it's happening very quickly, I'm still doing anchor, bevel, cut with each pass. One more cut, and we'll be done. You notice that I'm holding my hand against the tool rest to ensure that the cut is even across the length of the cylinder. Okay, so we did it. We turned a square blank like this into a round cylinder. We talked about bevel supported cuts, which is where you engage the bevel first before the cutting edge. Anchor, bevel, cut, anchor, bevel, cut, over and over again. We also talk about cutting downhill in a spindle mode with the lengthwise grain orientation. You always want to cut from the larger diameter to the smaller diameter. And then we also talked about the angle of the cutting edge. When you go straight into a side grain, it's very rough, but if you can tilt the handle and get it engaged at closer to a 45-degree angle, you'll see that it's a lot smoother and also more efficient cut. These are really important skills, and you're going to use them throughout your wood turning career. So it's good to go ahead and get started practicing on them now. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the section below. And if you have anything that you'd like to see demonstrated, I'd love to hear that too. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I really appreciate it. So happy and safe wood turning. I hope this helps you improve your skills. I'll see you next time.